Are you ready to say goodbye to the constant ups and downs of the artist income roller coaster? Whether you're a full-time artist who wants to increase and stabilize your income, a part-time musician who wants to go full-time, or a hobbyist who needs to fund your passion projects, this podcast will equip you with the tools, resources, and inspiration to make it happen. My name is Bree Noble. I'm a musician, best-selling author, and educator whose mission is to help musicians like you to increase the income you're already making and tap into new income streams so you can create a more diverse, stable, reliable income from music and finally ditch the starving artist mentality. Now let's dive into the Profitable Musician Show. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the podcast. My name is Bree Noble, and I am here with Nick Holmstén, and we're going to talk about he's known as the creator of Spotify playlists, and he'll explain to you why that is, his background working for Spotify, and we're going to talk a lot about fans and kind of the new economy of fans for musicians. So before we get into all of that, I always want to set the stage and get the backstory from our guest because especially Nick has clearly done so much in the industry. I want to make sure that you guys have that context as we start to talk about kind of what he's talking about currently. So Nick, if you could just let people know, what's your journey looked like? How have you moved through your music career?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Bree. So I'm from Sweden from the beginning. I lived in New York for about 7 years right now. My background is that I started out always being like everyone, I think, get into music industry that was an aspiring artist, tried to get a career with that, was involved a little bit in hospitality as well at that time. So I was running a rock club with a stage, did performances. Eventually, I started a Britpop band at the time where this whole Britpop movement would happen all over the world, and there was a lot of Swedish band that had a lot of success in Asia with kind of British-inspired pop in the Beatles way. So I created a band together with some friends in the end of the 90s called Apple Brown Betty. We had not like a massive hits, but a song that really got viral and reached a lot of attention. So we got a record deal. We went out on tours and stuff like that. Led into much more behind writing for other artists. And I had the privilege to be signed to a publisher and had some success. Started to work for Simon Cowell for a few years. And then I would say, like, after the golden day of the music industry, especially living in Sweden in the middle of 2000, we see, the decline happening and piracy taking over. So Sweden in 2006, 2007, saw this enormous decline in the music industry. A lot of Swedish startups tried to solve that. I had a couple of startups because I was really into the tech scene as well. So with my background and trying to understand like how we're going to make money in this industry, I also saw other companies at the same time, like Spotify, SoundCloud. It was almost like solving the future of the music industry was really located to an area around Stockholm where we had the luxury of early broadband penetration, a lot of engineering, and also a lot of successful artists, producers, songwriters. So there was like a community that really tried to solve that. My route for that was I was involved in a couple of startups. This was a time where MySpace was the dominating part, and Facebook started to do inroads there. So we built a community first in a company called Snowfish, which was based on a rev share model on the social media, which didn't exist at that time. Got a lot of attention, but couldn't really compete with the big, dragons back on Silicon Valley. So after that, we did a lot of things, and we started to see that Spotify got a lot of attention. I was a very early user and realized that, okay, this is probably gonna be the solution. They took the best from the piracy of, basically having files available for playing or downloading, but solve the problem of making it feeling native, meaning like when you press the play button, the song started, which was something that felt magical at that time. And everybody gets so hyped around it. But for me, it was more interesting to think about what that will mean for the music industry, because the music industry has been retail transactional industry where not anyone can like choose to buy every record they want. So when I grew up, it's you get into something, like your passion, this is my genre, and I think it's partly for belonging to something, but also like it's a financial thing. And suddenly I was thinking about like imagine when people have all their music available in their pockets. And I have these theses that in the old days on the record stores, we forget that maybe only 20%, 25% of the people that actually listen to music went into record stores. Most of the people got their music through radio, TV, or other sources. So they were looking for a curated experience. So the bet we did was like, okay, if everybody gets millions of songs in their pockets, and they used to have a very small selection of their favorite artists, how can we help them discover new music and enrich every moment in life? Because if you take away the cost of listening to music, you're gonna choose other music for different moments. So the bet with Tunigo was really to create like a strategy that was music for life and trying to figure out like what is the perfect music for moments, not specifically focusing on genres. That was the only thing that people were talking about that time. So it was a little bit like if you have a cocktail party, you will never in the old days consider to play like Sinatra. But maybe if someone curated this experience for you, you can enrich that moment and create another vibe. And I always felt when I went to New York, 25, 30 years ago, and walked into these boutique hotels and they play this launchy jazz chill music, and I felt this totally like changed the whole atmosphere on that place. So we what we did was really at that time starting to build and bringing in editors, technical team, and start thinking about what is the future of playlist and what is the future of streaming. And we become pretty early. And keep in mind, at that time Spotify didn't have any own playlist. It was basically like a search window. You created your playlist. If someone shared a playlist with you at that time, it was usually like a long URL with no like description or something like that, and it had a title. So we try to think about like, okay, but if we try to prime this and use artworks and good descriptions and categorize these playlists into all these moments in life where people go through, like where they might think that taste of music for me is very different what you're listening to if you're gonna go out with your friends on a Friday night or wake up in the morning on a Sunday with your partner. You have different tastes and they could be different moments. That was like the hypothesis. The hypothesis show that this was something that when people started to come into the streaming environment, that they were looking for guidance and curation. So we become first a Spotify partner, which is cool. So, and they launched, this is a long time ago, so it's like 2011, 2012, they launched a system where you could have apps within Spotify. So you can have a Tunigo app where you find playlists that was curated. But we started to expand, and eventually we opened up business in the US, and we started to do inroads and popularity. And Spotify saw that happen, and we even passed Spotify as with our telco partnership in Sweden to become like the most downloaded app in the App Store, even more than Spotify of all apps. And that was when Daniel, the founder CEO of Spotify, reached out and wanted to have a conversation that led to that they acquired a company in 2013. And that's was when actually Spotify playlist was born. So we came in the company, and our mission was really to build what's today is the browse feature and starting to categorize music and going from a startup into like these very successful, I would still say startup, but growing extremely. When I was there and joined, Spotify was around 600 people. We had the ability to really build out the curation team and the programming team globally, with all the different needs of domestic music. And just a story, when I left 2020, I think it was about 9 or 10,000 people. So it was like the whole industry changed. And we started building it out, and Spotify playlists become, like the talk of the industry, the way to break artists. We create a very sophisticated system to measure this with data and improve it. And then when more and more data started to work with the editorial. We started a lot of bets how we could use machine learning AI to even make it better. So in the end, like in the last years, I took over and become like what's called the global head of music at Spotify, which was responsible for all the industry relations, artists, and editorial programming, and so on and so on. So I had the luxury, I would say, like to by coincidence and a blessing to come into a company that became the biggest company in the music industry, and I was able to sit on that front seat and see the whole industry transition into that, which it's a very conservative industry. Nothing ever happens for so many years, but everything changes. Uh, and as everything, I'm very entrepreneurial. I like building things. But it was a very rewarding culture at Spotify. You felt like very entrepreneurial. The soul of a startup was there. When I moved with a family to US in 2018 because of my role, we also moved into like 14 top floors on 4 World Trade Center in the financial center. And then I think the company started to become more of a corporations, which is an actual step, which I felt a little bit like, okay, I've been here for 7 years. This is like a little bit of what I signed up is starting to change. I had conversation with the lead team at Spotify and talking about like that Spotify should consider taking a position on like because I felt like the old record stores, the MTV area, the thing where fans and artists met in real life has kind of disappeared. Everything was like based on a mobile phone. So I wanted to bring that back. So I started to look when I still was at Spotify on like how can DSPs position themselves of being more in the business of building this relationship between artists and fans in real life because that's where I felt the passion always exists in music. When I was down at Times Square, I looked at a lot of buildings, and by coincidence, there was some construction going on there. They were looking for someone to lead an entertainment mission of a very, very high level, expensive project that had this outdoor stage leading to Times Square. And it was just that moment I felt like this is probably never going to happen, but it was too interesting to say no. So I joined forces, came in there from the landlords and the investors in that building to take on and build up something called TSX Entertainment. That was really like the entertainment strategy on the big $3 billion project at Times Square called TSX Broadway. And that's where we really what we built over this 4.5 year. I left just before the summer to do a couple of other things, but mostly because the problem that happens within commercial real estate and interest rates slow down the projects. I felt we didn't have the forward kind of pushing energy that I wanted, and we had a little bit different views of what the next step will be. But it ended up that we started to activate that stage, and that stage become like one of these kind of amazing tentpole events that everybody talks about. So the first show we did was, and everything was like surprise shows in the middle of Times Square, getting the permits, getting artists to come and perform. There was no ticketed events. You needed sponsors and you need to build like a financial model around it. But the interest from artists was so enormous because everybody understood that this is going to be pretty amazing if it works. So we did that first show in I can't remember 2022. It must be in like in the summer of 22 with Post Malone. That kind of exploded and became this massive talk of the town. And after that, like the phone never stopped ringing. And we did the Jungkook from BTS. We drove like 20, 40,000 people down to Times Square. The last one we did was with Shakira in March last year, which was a incredible moment. So what I wanted to prove with that is that there are ways, like in this way, when you activate fans in marketing, that you can create these big events that create such an amplification. So we saw in the numbers that the earned media, the reach, the uptake on streaming was enormous, like so. And my focus was after that was really to try to write this book that I did called Fan Power Future to really emphasize on the thing how important fans are for artists today, and they are the new marketeers, and that is the driver of the new music industry. And that's what my passion is, and what I'm building today is really based on that.
Wow. Well, you've certainly done a lot, that's for sure. So I wanted to ask, like, based upon your work at Spotify and like how you helped build out playlists and things like that, what did you learn around that as far as like how people discover music and then like how that kind of translates into fans maybe becoming marketers for other, for artists. Like I know for me, like I love to make playlists and I love introducing people to other artists that they haven't heard of on my playlists.
Yeah, I mean, like we had like a mission at Spotify, and that was to like connect as many artists as possible with as many fans as possible through like our playlist syndicate. And what that means is that how do you manage everything from like top tier artists that already have a big fan base to new emerging artists that want to find a fan base? And the way we did it was really creating a syndicate of playlists where we had like a lot of different feeder playlists on the lowest level where we can introduce new artists in a context. Because keep in mind, like people have a lot of perception of what kind of music they like. Because if you ask someone like, I don't like that kind of music, I don't like that. But sometimes, like when they hear a song, they like it, and they might not know that that is exactly what you said you didn't like. But when you put it in context, your senses is going to work in a different way, and we prove that. So what we tried to do was automatically build the systems where we got a lot of feedback data, where we could introduce artists to people, and then first turn them listener into fans. By listening to an artist, you want to find out more about them, and we had a lot of data to see how we turn them into fans. So Spotify today is way, way more lean back than it used to be. And what I mean with that, a lot of people come into Spotify because you have so many curated experiences based on your taste or your moment, and you press play, and then you usually just listen to it. It's a little bit different when you come to younger ages. They are a little bit more lean into their favorite artists, but overall consumption is very lean back. Uh, that is a little bit problematic because what you're looking for and what we did in the beginning was say like, okay, if someone don't skip a track, it has some kind of understanding that people like it. If they save it, it also has an indication that they really like it. If they replay the song from their own collection, is the absolute highest reward. So what we're trying to do is right move people from passive listeners into active listeners to really create them and replay them. And that's how we see, like fans being built. And when they start to get into songs, like you're starting to give more content to them, you're building up like a better and better relationship. But to be honest, like this is going to come back a lot to the artist themselves to really making sure that they are authentic and are close and true to their fans, because fans hire you, but they fire you as well. They see almost their brands, artists they work with as an extension of their personality. So it's a very different time today than being a fan maybe 30 years ago. They asking more, they expecting more. I always mention the fact like if you had a photo with you with a celebrity 20 years ago, that was a big thing. You probably had a photo and say like, hey, I met this person. I was like, I can't believe it. Today, a 12-year-old expect to get a selfie with Taylor Swift or any other superstars out there. So you have to really balance the thing like how do you treat your fans, how do you involve them, and how do they feel recognized, and appreciated. So the journey with Spotify, just to end that, was really trying to help artists find a fan base, and then we kind of like it's their job to keep giving them and build out their music, their kind of content in general.
Right. And they can keep releasing more singles and building out their catalog. And that's one way to keep that relationship going. But I've always found that jump from Spotify to other places to be difficult. I know that you can put your social media on there, but like for me, it's like, can they get them on my email list so then they'll come to my shows and things like that? how do you get around that kind of big gap there?
Yeah, I mean, like that is probably, like the big challenge is if you think about Spotify specifically, they are in a business where they basically give back 70% of all the revenues they come in. So 30% is what they need to fund their business. And I think maybe last year was the first year in 16 years or something like that where they actually made a profit. So up into today, you have had a lot of investors and of course, like from the stock market that have invested in the company to provide these money back to the industry, I would say. So their job has always been like to figure out how they can increase their margin because that's what the expectation is. And here's the contradiction, like Spotify want to in some way get revenue from connecting the artists with their fans in different ways to get more attention on them. So unfortunately, like I can feel sometimes like if you earn a big following on Spotify, it's a little bit weird and you cannot communicate with them. But
Right.
here is like the contradiction in that is that it's I don't think Spotify will give artists that because that's a little bit of their secret sauce. And that is why the valuation is what it is because they sitting on all that data. So I agree with you. And that's why I keep saying to people like you can't depend on Spotify to help you with your promotion. You have to build your fan base on the outside because Spotify is more an amplification and it's also like the mirroring of what you do. But it's very, very difficult to move the needle within the Spotify ecosystem. You get analytics, very fantastic data points, but honestly, like you need to figure out like how you get 100 fans and then how you get them to 1,000 fans. If you can build 1,000 fans, you can build 10,000 fans. It's just that strategy, but it's not going to happen automatically just because you upload your music to Spotify. And there, I think the expectation today is I release a song, nothing happened. That is the world we're living in, as the competition is so brutal to cut through the noise. You're not just competing with other artists, you're competing with everything that is time consuming, all the entertainment that people put into. So you have to ask yourself, like, why should people listen to you? I believe we are in a world of meritocracy. So but I think it's a marathon. People need to put other timelines into it. They need to put in the hours. But if you're talented enough, at least you got a really good shot today that didn't exist, I would say, 20 years ago.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's not the gating that used to exist back then. But like you said, there is a lot more competition. So what do you think is the best way for them to connect? Is it social media? Is it in-person gigs? Is it all of the above?
Yeah, I think it's all of the above. I think I seen, artists that actually no one I've heard about, but they're making money, they're building fan base that just do like backyard concerts with their fans, like, and they come up with a structure like, hey, you're building a small fan base on social media, whatever like platform you choose from. And then you're starting to engage them and start offering things. I can come and play in your backyard and you invite friends and blah, 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 and stuff like that. You have to build from the beginning. There's today in the music industry, there's not a shortcut. There's not a big jump. You're not gonna end up on like today's top hits directly when you release a music. Like, but the good thing about systems like Spotify is they also tracking a lot of data points outside the platform. So they know when something started to create some noise and move. And that will help you. So if you have to do that first, push yourself. Then you're going to see when that happens and it kind of mirrors on Spotify and they start to get more data, they gonna amplify you because they only looking for the best user experience. So if people want to have it, they're going to put the machinery and test it, see if they can drive it up. So the simplest way to say it is that you are responsible for your first 1,000 fans. Like that is always what I said to people. How you make a decision to build that foundation, there are so many different ways. And the ones you said, like how do you do it? Yeah, but you have to be out there. You have to perform. That's the easiest way. Like perform, perform, perform. If you're not a performer, yeah, you probably need to start creating content that shows off your authentic personality and attract people. And if it picks up, it picks up, and you have to keep trying. But it's not a human right to be an artist and be able to living on it. Like, and I think a lot of people believe that is, yeah, I just made music. Why isn't Spotify paying me this money? But and you know it as well because you're in the industry. We wouldn't have these talent shows and see tens of thousands of people showing up that could not really sing if there was like the same system that in sports. Like, it's not that people sitting at home and say like, hey, like, I think I'm gonna join the Chiefs and play Super Bowl next year. So how do I start? Like, that is the craziest thing for me. Like, it's almost feels like music is a different thing because it's a little bit more fluffy and not measurable, which opens up all these people thinking like, I can make it because they look at the artist and they might not recognize the success or why they're successful, but I think like they're not so good singing, they're not so good looking. I have the same shot. Maybe I'm special and I'm starting to go for it. That I think is really why we have 100,000 songs being uploaded on Spotify every day because there's too many people out there dreaming about becoming an artist, which is good by the way. But the question is like, is it reasonable that all these 100,000 should be successful? Of course not.
Yeah, and the thing is, I mean, as a music curator, I can say that there is so much good music. I mean, like you
Yeah.
said, it's not a human right that they would get paid to be an artist. But on the other hand, I cannot believe the amount of music that I receive that is top notch.
Yeah,
So it's hard.
it is. I mean, like I usually say that there's definitely like a top segment with a lot, and I agree with you. I hear it all the time. Like there's a lot of fantastic music that never people gonna hear that would have been successful. But that is a little bit the reality of the times we're living in. Like we compete with so much. So it's not about that you are not as good as you should be. It has to be the right timing. You have to have some luck as well. But that's what I'm saying. Like if you're talented enough and you have the marathon mentality, you're willing to really put in the hours, at least I would say like you have a fair chance eventually to get somewhere. And in the old industry, as you know, you couldn't do that at all. Like you had to knock doors and you couldn't get your record out. Like it was impossible even getting in a recording studio. But now when technology is cheaper and everyone can do that, of course, we have now seen that there is an enormous amount of talent out there that should find their way to the audience. But to your point, there's a lot of them. So how do you navigate that? I don't have other solution than like if you're that talented, if you're that good, you should be able to start building your fan base, and that is what's going to eventually take you there.
Yeah, I agree, but you also can't be focused on I have to make it or not, or I'm gonna not be happy. Like you have to have joy in the building and the creating of, your music legacy and, getting your things that you want to write or record out there into the world. Like there has to be that joy in the process, or you may as well not do it because, the percentage chance of making it is low, and maybe you will and maybe you won't, but like you don't want to go through all of it and then say I only have one goal. My goal is to quote make it, and whatever that is to you. You got to be able to feel like you're making it all the time. When I release a single, that's a win, that kind of thing. But I want to talk about your book because it's an interesting title, and the title is Fan Powered Future. So what exactly does that mean, and what inspired you to write it?
Yeah, it was like really the shift from when traditional media, which has been the way of, getting the message out for a long period of time. That's the way music was marketing before, TV commercials and so on and so on. And we all see that shift happening to the decline of traditional media and less kind of outlets, the traditional outlets to buy your way through means that we are in an engagement model, which most of the information we get today is through the channels we are on, usually social media. And the people that really talk about it, the people that move the needles, is the people that are really passionate about storytelling around something specific. So for me, it's been a little bit like artists need to rethink around like the role of the fans. So the way I look at it, and this is why this book is also as much like a marketeering book, from that perspective. So today, artist takes control of there. It goes all the way from the biggest artists in the world. If it's Taylor's, Drake, whoever it is, like they own their rights today. They own the recordings. They didn't used to do it, but they do it today. They licensing to the major record labels on completely different terms than before. In the old days, maybe an average like royalty was between 8 to 15%, something like that. Today, they probably license the content on an 80-20 in their favor and get a big advance. What that means is that the artists today, basically, because all the deal they do with the record labels, they cannot put in the 20% kind of marketing money into the budget anymore. So the responsibility is going to come more and more over to not just the artists, but every brand in the world right now. Instead of thinking about consumers as consumers, you have to think about them as an extension of your brand. So what I mean with that is that the reward mechanism that everything has been built up, and this is what I'm talking about the book, was like in the beginning of social media, getting a like and a comment and stuff like that was a kind of reward. And then you started to see that like big influencers with a lot of followers started to charge for posting to their followers. And then you started to see like smaller influencers in networks started to do the same thing to get the power. And so my way has always been like, it's not enough for artists to take fans for granted anymore. Like they need to be rewarded in some way. So what is that meaning? So in the last chapter, I make an example, which is easy to do when you take the biggest artist and someone that's really into her fans, like a Taylor. So imagine like in 2027, Taylor goes out and say like, I'm gonna give back 20% of the revenues of my new record to my fans. And that will create, like, what is she saying? What is that meaning? That sounds like, and fans will probably feel like, how can I get hold of that? And I'm not talking about fiat currency. I'm not talking about payment. I'm talking about like artists need to take from a new strategy in marketing, taking maybe 20% of their earning. They need to put that back towards the fans in taking that bucket of money into experience and ask, what do fans want to have? Yeah, they want to have, ability to buy limited merch. They want to be able to get the tickets or a discounted ticket, even just being able to buy them instead of secondary crazy prices. So in my view is that like in some way it's going to be a systems where an artist goes out to the fan base and give them assets and say like, hey, I need help, like, and you guys are an extension of my brands. Here are some assets you can use. Tell the story what you think. I'm not going to tell you what you tell, like, and when you do these things, we're going to track, you're going to get some kind of point system. You can exchange these reward into the experience you're looking for. So maybe I see you at that concert. Maybe you get that merch. Somewhere down that line is where I see we heading towards. And that the incentives for the fans is also important to know, like, they want to be recognized. I'm coming down to like a bigger kind of world situation that we all aware. Like people are more lonely than ever. I read like a New York Times article, but it say like, 70% of the people that go on the Taylor Swift concerts are pretty lonely people, like,
Mm.
and everyone want to belong. Everybody want to be part of a community. So when you see what really happens around these artists that has been able to build these communities and fan base, that becomes the new friendship model. That's their belonging. They plan it months ahead. They have conversation in their communities. They meet. They change bracelets. Whatever, like I when we did with John Cook, for example, the K-pop things. Like everybody has their kind of printed cards and changing them. It's a whole kind of structure that is really sophisticated. And there's also a hierarchy in some of these, especially the BTS army. It's really like an army. You think about it like you go up in grades in every country and you get recognized. So in a way, what the book's trying to do and what I'm trying to explain is that like you have to rethink. You can't see, and this goes for every brand, I would say, in pop culture, not just artists. Like you have fandoms in a lot of other brands as well. Like you have to rethink consumers into fans because the moment you put another kind of name on them, you realize that you are so dependent on them, and they feel that they are part of you, so you cannot disappoint them. So I think in the future that there needs to be a way to build a platform or systems where fans feel like I'm putting all this effort, I'm burning for this, like I should not be the super fans that everybody believes they can make more money out of it because I'm putting so much into that flywheel of that artist to get it going. And I believe if that model works, the more you put in as an artist, the more you're going to get a return, and everyone's going to be happy. So that is the actually what the fundamentals of the book is, and that is description from read stories and also the change of the industry over, like the last 2 decades and where we are right now and what I think is going to happen in the future, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it sounds like you're suggesting kind of taking a portion of what would normally be your marketing budget,
Yeah.
investing it into fans in this way. And it seems kind of like a combination between like encouraging them to create like UGC content and then giving them like a loyalty program. And, if you're extending it to like brands,
Hmm.
some brands do this kinds of thing as well. And I think it makes sense. I'm curious what you think about whether this is doable for the independent artist because, Taylor Swift, she's got like and BTS and anybody like that's got a big group of people behind her that can create this infrastructure. And most of the people listening to this show are independent artists. Do you think this is something they can actually tackle?
Yeah, I mean, like if you go back and just take BTS as an example, I think this is an interesting story because people don't really know about how that was created. So there was a hypothesis around that BTS and K-pop was happening. BTS was not a big band in Korea. Like it was really a strategy to take the diaspora. So like that, so they looked at like, okay, there's a lot of Asian people that has the pride, they want to belong to something, like we're gonna make them involve them very early. We're gonna put up, like what this band's gonna look like. They're gonna be part of putting them together. Like it was not the big money in that time. So they did that whole journey, but they starting by creating. So my recommendation I keep coming back to is like the Taylor's example is just like how it's going to play out. Like if you play your cards and you build your fan base, Taylor has always cared about the fans. Everybody knows that. BTS has always done there. Then you have a bunch of artists that don't care about the fans, and they have big problems today. Like because if you're not authentic, if people don't trust you and stuff like that, it's very difficult to navigate. So if I would be like an emerging artist, I'm coming back to the same thing. In the same way as you say, like you need to involve the people in the content. What I love about fans is fans has a tendency, a little bit like you said before, like you want to discover these artists early. You want to be one of the first that get involved. So you know already from the start that there is a lot of music fans out there. They want to engage and get involved. So it's more about like if you create the right incentives, like they're going to be the extension and your team that might start with 10 people becomes 100 and so on and so on. And that gives you that powerful kind of exchange. And the most important thing is that like imagine in the future where which I believe that this will be a pretty obvious kind of next step. To engage them because I don't understand why it wouldn't be like what I mean with that is that it's important to know it's not about the money, but if you go into a fan and you think about like what they care about, what they want to do, what they love, is that they love access. They want to be able. What happens today is that most fans ends up, either not getting tickets to the big shows or they buying, secondaries for crazy price and ends up in a nosebleed. And the people with the money sit on the front row, which artist hates, like by the way. They want to make sure, and that's why they introduced the golden circle and all these different things to bring fans closer. So we know that the artists want to reward the fans by making sure that they are present on these shows and get access to that. So they don't care about the financial model because they know the long term, the more happy fans you have, the more fans will kind of join. So going back to the emerging artist story is that I think the exact same model should be used. I think you just need to build because all these artists from the beginning started like that. It's very easy to believe that like, okay, yeah, but they are so big. But if you go back and ask the story, the initial story around this band, you're gonna find out they did that hard work. They went play in shopping malls. They stand outside school. They went to high schools. They did all that thing. They just did it. They put in the hours. People are too lazy today. This is the you're actually like your own CEO. You're the entrepreneur. Like if you're a musician today, whatever your position you take, like you are the brand. You are the ones who should be out there selling and represent yourself. Not everybody wants to do it, so that's fine. But then you need to find a strategy that works with your personality, which could be done in a lot of different ways. But there's no shortcut there. Like so for me, it's no difference. It's the same kind of structure process that you have to go through, but it's gonna pay off.
Yeah, no, I think it's good to just put it out there like that and say, look, this is what you have to do if you want to get to where you want to go. You're right. Artists can be a little bit lazy or complain, and I get it. I get it. It's hard to be an artist, but yeah, I don't have as much patience for any of that anymore. Because we do have so much agency right now that we didn't have before. Do you
Mhm.
think that there is a platform or types of platforms that are exist yet that can help musicians do this?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out, and that is my what I'm doing right now is really trying to understand. And I think it comes back to something that I truly believe in. When I have done the analysis around all these kind of artist fan platforms, they are really built around most of them on the same hypothesis. It's like they build a lot of tools. They go out and say, artists, come here, give this content, sell this content, bring your fans here. There's something problematic with that because it also means that you could probably get the low tier artists, maybe some mid tier artists, but the bigger artists will not join
Mm.
because they know that you want to have them there so they drive the traffic. So the big question is that you have to rethink it and say like, okay, if I don't have the artists, if I gotta build a platform where fans are, like, and just focus on the fans, that's where it needs to start because you need to create that leverage. The fans needs to get the leverage towards the artist. What I mean with that is that like artists needs to come in with a different perception. So like I need to be on that platform. Today, these platforms where the fans are social media platforms where they own all the content, like which is not a logical thing. So what I'm trying to figure out together with some partners I'm building with is really like how do you create a platform that is a fans first platform where fans join without the endorsement of the artist from day one. Like what can you offer fans that makes them interesting to sign up for something because in the future that could give them a leverage
Mm.
to all the things I'm saying to you right now. Like if you get more powerful and create these foundations, you're gonna have more say, in these artists' future. You're gonna get different experiences and coming closer to it. That's where I think the trick is. It's not an easy thing, but I think that's what you need to crack, and that's what I'm trying to do. If we're gonna be able to do it, we have some really interesting, completely new concepts around how that can be built. So time will
Mm.
go. But no, I don't think there's one platform. I think it's a combination of platforms that you could use to achieve it today, like, but it's not streamlined, like join that, keep pushing, because there's not a platform outside of social medias where fans feel ownership, like, and feels like they are treated in a way that it should be treated.
Yeah, no, I'm really curious to see what you're able to build, and I'll have you back on the show when you're there. But I think, there is Patreon, and I think that's what they tried to do, but I do think it's just too artist centric. Like it's about how can we support this artist? How can we make sure that they can keep making music and all that stuff? And it's all about the artist, what's in it for the artist and not what's in it for the fans, even though they want you to think that. Like, yeah, I'm giving you these special things because you're my patron, but it still feels like it's artist centric.
I agree with that. And I think it's like I always refer them to more the GoFundMe strategy around these things, which I think is a completely different business. That is, it's not what I'm talking about. Like I think you need to do it in a different way because that is one directional in some way. Like put this money in so I can do this and I can serve you with that. It's a one directional conversation that always in the end ends up being way, way, way more positive, I would say, for the artist than the fans. So I think the fans need to get a value in that new platform. They need to be rewarded in a way, not see. I mean, a lot of people talk about that, and this is the worst thing I hear is that the super fan economy. That's a new discussion in the music industry, and it's always built around revenue. So now someone came up like, oh, super fan spends more money. Let's focus on super fans. There's nothing in all the data I ever seen that shows that there's an equivalent between a super fan and dollars. It doesn't mean that super fans have more money. Not at all. And I think there's so much diluted when they're looking at their like the spending from super fans. Like they don't know. I would say that it's not the true super fans that either they get pushed in to buy a very expensive ticket or something like that because it's the only option for them. And someone else is helping them, parents, whatever it is, to pay for it, in some way. It's not the same of saying like that fan is willing to spend so much money because of their passion. Sometimes they get forced in to get that ticket, and the parents see the sadness in the eyes of the kids and help them out. So what I mean with that is that, but you also have all these fans, super fans, that cannot afford that. So I hate the fact that you say a super fan is equivalent to more revenue spent. They are way more engaged. So use that engagement from them instead and reward them with what they can't afford, but they helping you so much. And that is what drives me. It
I
needs to be,
love that. I love that. That means you're valuing their time and their passion versus just their money.
yeah. And I think, like Bree, that the most successful artists today are the ones who are able to feel authentic, that cares about the fans, and the fans feel that they're being taken care of, like which is very tricky when it comes to levels of it. And the artist needs to think about it. And it's never based on money, like, and keep in mind, like, there's no equivalent between the money. There's a different also economic incentives from what an artist paying and a record label or management or a touring company like Live Nation that might be driven on their quarterly earnings. The artists don't think about that at all. Like that's the result of being successful, but it's not money that is a driver for the majority of the artists. It's really about the performing and the storytelling.
Hmm.
Um, so now when artists takes more control, we're starting to see that their priorities shifting towards that. That's why I believe that there is a better future for fans, and that means better future for artists.
I love it. I love it. So where can people find fan-powered futures, your new book?
Yeah, I mean, like the obvious one is Amazon, and if you want to find out more, you can also go to nickholmstén.com where you have links to all the books and more information and videos. And I actually planning to add some additional courses and stuff like that around it because I realized when I wrote the book and got a lot of attention around it that it's pretty obvious that when people understand the change that happens in the industry, but I think the more people that started leaning towards that, we also gonna get that shift, which in the end will be better for everyone. Like everyone, I'm always coming from the situation where I love when everyone can be a winner, when the artist getting more successful, the fans get happier, like, and because that leads to a flywheel in the end, because I think what comes down to is when you build this strong relationship, you also have a lot of other companies knocking on the door for the fans and the artists to help offset a lot of these money because they want to play a part of it. So building that super strong relationship between fans and artists will open up for a less expensive experience for the fans.
So almost like a bringing in sponsors or things like that.
Yeah, I mean, like this is usually what traditional media is built around, like so
Hmm.
it's just like that new model. But I don't want everybody to believe that the fan's going to pay for everything, like that's what I
Right.
think is is the discussion right now, and I think that's going to change.
I think that would be an amazing experience for artists and fans if we can make that model work. So you guys check out the book on Amazon. Go to nickholmstad.com. Is that right? And then you can find out more information on Nick and the book. And I want to thank you so much, Nick. This has been a really great conversation. I've loved learning about kind of how Spotify playlists were came to be. They're like one of my favorite things in the world. So thank you for your part in that you played in all of that.
Thank you so much for having me, Bree. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Profitable Musician Show. I would love to know your takeaways and aha moments from this episode. Leave me a comment over at profitablemusician.com so I can bring you more of the information, interviews, and resources that you love. Thanks to Rondi Fay, one of my Academy members, for providing the music for our podcast. You can check her out at rondifay.com. That's RANDIFAY.com. Just remember, knowledge is power, but without implementation, it is useless. And inspiration without action is merely entertainment. But I know you're not just a dreamer, you are a doer. And I promise I'll be here every week to support you and remind you that you can be a profitable musician.